Drinking alcohol, smoking, and drug use are harmful to health.
In the outskirts of Willow Creek, a sleepy Ohio town, where the biggest excitement was the annual county fair, stood the derelict St. Agnes Hospital. Abandoned since the late 1980s after a scandal that rocked the community to its core, the building had become a local legend, shrouded in overgrown weeds, gnarled oak trees, and an aura of unspoken dread. The scandal involved unethical experiments conducted by a rogue group of doctors, whispers of mind-altering drugs tested on unwilling psychiatric patients, surgeries without anesthesia, and rumors of deaths covered up as natural causes. The hospital was shut down overnight, its staff scattering like rats from a sinking ship, leaving behind a husk of brick and mortar that time had eagerly begun to reclaim. Vines crept up the cracked walls like veins, and shattered windows stared out like empty eye sockets. Locals whispered about strange lights flickering in those windows at night, eerie moans echoing through the surrounding woods, and shadows that moved with a purpose. Most folks avoided it like the plague, crossing to the other side of the road if their path took them too close. But for thrill-seekers like me and my friends, Jake and Sarah, it was an irresistible magnet, pulling us in with the promise of adventure and a story to tell. It was mid-October 2023, the kind of autumn where the leaves turned fiery red and orange, crunching underfoot like brittle bones. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from distant chimneys, and a harvest moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie orange glow over everything it touched. Willow Creek wasn't much. A handful of diners, a hardware store, and a community college, where the three of us were sophomores, majoring in nothing particularly exciting. I was studying journalism, dreaming of breaking big stories, but stuck writing fluff pieces for the campus paper. Jake was the tech genius, always fiddling with devices, his backpack constantly packed with tools and partially built drones. Sarah, with her quick wit and no-frills attitude, was a pre-med student, making her the ideal skeptic for our small crew. We weren't believers in the paranormal. We were just restless college kids chasing a thrill, the kind that came from testing limits in a town where nothing ever happened. The idea to explore St. Agnes started as a jest during one of our late-night study sessions in the grimy dorm basement. Jake had pulled up an old article on his laptop about the hospital's shutdown, complete with fuzzy black and white photos of demonstrators outside its gates. "Check this out," he'd said, his eyes gleaming with that roguish spark. "They claim the place is haunted by the spirits of those poor souls who perished in the experiments. Lights, noises, the whole deal. We should investigate." Sarah had scoffed, her ponytail swaying as she leaned back in her chair. "Haunted? Come on. It's probably just vagrants or wind whistling through the gaps. But fine, if it'll quiet you down, let's do it." I was hesitant at first. I'll admit I scare easily, but the excitement won me over. We planned it for a Friday night, equipping ourselves with flashlights, a budget digital camera Jake had tweaked to record in dim light, and a backpack stuffed with snacks and energy drinks. No one knew we were going. We didn't want nagging from our roommates or, worse, the police getting involved for trespassing. As we sped out of town in Jake's battered Jeep, the radio sputtering with static and bursts of vintage rock, the conversation shifted to the hospital's past. I'd scoured the internet, piecing together bits from archived articles and obscure forums. Apparently, the head physician was this guy named Dr. Harlan Voss, I said, thumbing through my phone. He was fixated on unraveling the human psyche, believed he could treat madness by triggering hallucinations or something. Patients started vanishing, and when the authorities stormed the place, they found chambers packed with gear. shock therapy devices, straitjackets, you name it. Sarah scoffed from the back seat. Sounds like urban myth nonsense. Hospitals back then were brutal anyway. No spirits, just grim history. Jake smirked in the rearview mirror. We'll find out. If we capture anything on video, we could blow up online. Picture the views. The road shrank as we left the paved streets behind, veering onto a dirt trail that twisted through the forest. The trees pressed in, their branches clawing at the Jeep's roof like bony fingers. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting shifting patches of light and shadow on the ground. We parked a quarter-mile out, concealed behind a tangle of shrubs, and trekked the rest of the way. The hospital loomed ahead, its dark outline sharp against the night sky. Up close, it was even more daunting. A 3-story giant with a weathered sign over the entrance reading St. Agnes Mercy Hospital in flaking letters. The parking lot was a wasteland of cracked pavement, weeds sprouting through like stubborn survivors. Shattered glass crunched under our shoes as we neared a side window, its boards warped and loose from years of neglect. "Here we go," Jake murmured, wrenching the plywood aside with a crowbar he'd brought. It groaned loudly, making us all freeze, pulses racing. No sirens, no lights, just the breeze stirring the leaves. One by one, we slipped inside, dropping into what seemed like a reception area. Inside, the hospital was a frozen relic of decay, a labyrinth of ruin that overwhelmed the senses. The air was heavy and musty, thick with the stench of mold, dust, and something sharp beneath, like rusted iron or old blood. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing toppled chairs in the waiting area. Faded magazines from the 80s strewn like abandoned artifacts, Time covers with headlines about the Cold War and Hollywood gossip. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like tattered veils, and the floor was littered with debris, crumpled papers, broken vials, and rusted IV poles toppled like fallen guards. "Holy crap," Sarah muttered, her voice echoing unnaturally loud in the quiet. She nudged a discarded syringe, sending it sliding across the tiles. "This place is a health hazard. We should have brought masks." Jake chuckled, his beam sweeping the walls where vandals had left their marks. Tags like, "Spirits dwell here," and rough sketches of skulls. "Relax, Doc. It's just an old ruin. No one's died here in ages." Probably. We started our exploration on the ground floor, moving cautiously through the corridors. The layout was confusing, with hallways branching off in unexpected directions, doors hanging off their hinges. We peeked into what looked like an old emergency room. Gurneys pushed against the walls, stained sheets still draped over them, and cabinets with doors ajar, revealing empty shelves where medicines had long since been looted. I picked up a faded medical chart from the floor, its pages brittle and yellowed. Patient, Emily Thorne, age 32. Diagnosis, acute schizophrenia. Treatment, experimental protocol, V7. The notes were scrawled in hurried handwriting, mentioning hallucinogenic compounds and induced visions for therapeutic breakthrough. A chill ran down my spine as I read aloud. This Voss guy was a monster. Listen, subject reports seeing shadows that move independently. Recommend increased dosage. Sarah snatched the chart from me. Creepy, but not supernatural. People on drugs see all kinds of crap. Jake, filming with his camera, nodded. Yeah, but what if those shadows were real? What if the experiments opened some kind of door? We laughed it off, but as we delved deeper, the atmosphere grew heavier. The flashlight beams seemed to struggle against the darkness, as if it were a tangible thing pushing back. We found the cafeteria next, A vast room with long tables bolted to the floor, trays still scattered as if the last meal had been interrupted mid-bite. Mold bloomed on the walls in psychedelic patterns, and the smell here was worse, a mix of rot and something sickly sweet. Sarah wrinkled her nose. Ugh, probably dead animals in the vents. We rummaged through the kitchen, finding rusted pots and cans swollen with age. Jake pocketed a small scalpel he found in a drawer, grinning like a kid with a new toy. Souvenir, he said. I felt uneasy about it, but didn't say anything. Ascending the steps to the second floor, the groans of our footsteps reverberated like accusations. This level contained the general wards, rooms filled with corroded bed frames, mattresses worn and ripped, stuffing spilling out like guts. In one room, we discovered a child's drawing tacked to the wall, a rough crayon sketch of a doctor with oversized hands and no face, labeled the evil man. Kids' ward, perhaps? I murmured, my voice barely audible. The air felt chillier here, breezes whistling through shattered windows. Sarah shuddered, rubbing her arms. Let's keep going. This place is giving me chills. We explored a few more rooms, finding personal items abandoned. A locket with a faded photo of a family. A Bible with verses highlighted about demons and exorcism. Jake's camera hummed softly, recording everything. It was on the second floor that the first strange event happened. As we passed a nurse's desk, a phone rang. A piercing, old-fashioned chime that sliced through the silence like a shriek. We all startled, flashlights sweeping frantically. What the hell? Jake muttered, nearing the desk. The phone was ancient, its cord cut and hanging uselessly. Yet it rang again, relentless. We passed several doors, each marked with room numbers and faded warnings. High risk, isolation. Curiosity got the better of us, and we peeked inside a few. One was a therapy room, chairs arranged in a circle as if waiting for a group session that never came. Another contained electroshock equipment, wires frayed, machines gathering dust yet intact, conjuring images of patients convulsing in torment. In a third, we stumbled upon journals, patient diaries stacked neatly on a shelf. I thumbed through one, its pages crammed with frantic scrawls. The shadows whisper my sins. They want me to join them. Sarah read over my shoulder. Delusions. That's what happens when you tamper with people's minds. But her tone carried no certainty now. The tapping drew us deeper, toward the corridor's end, where a door stood slightly ajar, marked Examination Room 3. The sound was sharpest here, deliberate, almost demanding. My hand shook as I pushed the door open, the hinges shrieking like a wounded creature. Inside, the space was bare, except for a single metal chair bolted to the floor, its frame surrounded by faded bloodstains that bloomed like dark flowers across the cracked linoleum. Restraints dangled from the arms and legs, leather split with age. The walls were scored with scratches, deep gouges that formed strange patterns, symbols or words in a language we didn't recognize. The air grew heavy, pressing on our chests, making each breath a struggle. This is where it happened, I whispered. The experiments. Jake nodded, still filming. Creepy as hell. Let's grab some shots and get out. Yet something rooted us there, a morbid fascination we couldn't shake. That's when the temperature plunged, so abruptly, our breath misted in the beams of our flashlights, coiling like smoke. The tapping stopped abruptly, replaced by a low guttural hum, like someone chanting under their breath in a language we couldn't understand. It vibrated through the floor, into our bones. Sarah's bravado finally cracked. "What the hell is that?" she hissed, grabbing my arm hard enough to bruise. Her eyes darted around the room. Before we could move, the door slammed shut behind us with a deafening bang, the force rattling the walls. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Jake lunged for the handle, yanking desperately, but it wouldn't budge, like it was welded shut. "It's stuck. Help me." We all threw our weight against it, but nothing. Panic set in, our breaths coming in short gasps. Then we saw them. Shadows, tall, thin, and vaguely human, flickered along the walls, emerging from the corners where no light could cast them. They weren't reflections. There was nothing in the room to create such shapes. They moved independently, slithering closer, their edges blurring and sharpening like living ink. My flashlight flickered erratically, the beam weakening as if drained. Sarah's died completely with a pathetic whine. Jake's beam, the last one, swept the room and caught something worse. A figure materializing at the far end, clad in a tattered white coat stained with dark blotches. Its face was obscured in shadow, but where eyes should have been, there were only hollow voids, endless and pulling. In its hand, a scalpel glinted unnaturally, as if lit from within, despite the encroaching darkness. "You shouldn't be here," it rasped, its voice like gravel scraping against bone, echoing unnaturally. We screamed, pounding on the door with renewed frenzy. The figure didn't move, but the shadows closed in, their forms coalescing into tendrils, hands that reached out with elongated fingers. I felt something cold brush my neck, like icy digits grazing my skin, tracing lines that burned despite the chill. Whispers joined the hum, faint at first, then clearer. Our names, murmured with intimate knowledge. Alex, Jake, Sarah. Stay with us. Memories flooded unbidden, my childhood fears, Jake's regrets over a lost love, Sarah's hidden doubts about her future. The shadows were feeding on them, growing stronger. Jake, in a surge of adrenaline, threw his full weight against the door one last time. It gave way with a splintering crack, wood shattering as we tumbled into the hallway. We didn't hesitate. We ran, feet pounding the floor, the hum chasing us like a swarm of bees, the whispers swelling into a cacophony. Down the stairs, through the wards, past the cafeteria and ER, our flashlights, miraculously flickering back to life, bouncing wildly. Something pursued us. I felt it, a presence at our heels, cold breath on the back of my neck. We burst through the window, scraping knees and elbows on the sill, tumbling into the overgrown lot. Outside, we collapsed, gasping in the cold night air under the harvest moon. My flashlight was dead again, batteries drained impossibly fast. Jake's revealed something chilling, fresh scratches on my neck, 3 thin lines oozing blood, too precise to be from branches or debris. Sarah was shaking uncontrollably, muttering about the figure's eyes, or rather, the lack of them, bottomless pits that seemed to swallow light. We piled into the Jeep, tires screeching as we sped away, the hospital shrinking in the rear view until it was just a dark shape against the trees. We never went back, and we don't talk about it anymore. The video on Jake's camera? Corrupted, nothing but static and distorted whispers. But sometimes, late at night when sleep eludes me, I hear that hum, faint but unmistakable, vibrating through the walls of my dorm. I check the scratches. They've scarred over, faint white lines that itch when the moon is full. And I wonder if the doctors of St. Agnes are still making their rounds, their experiments unfinished, looking for patients who never truly left. The shadows, the whispers, they followed us out, patient and persistent, waiting for the right moment to pull us back into the decay. But that wasn't the end of it. In the weeks that followed, strange things began happening. It started small, easily dismissed as coincidence or stress. I'd wake up to the sound of tapping on my window, only to find nothing there but frost patterns that looked suspiciously like handprints. Jake's gadgets started malfunctioning, his drone crashing mid-flight, his laptop displaying garbled text that read like medical notes. Subject resistant. Increased dosage. Sarah, the steadfast skeptic, began having nightmares, vivid dreams of being strapped to that metal chair, the figure in the white coat leaning over her with its scalpel, whispering procedures in that gravelly voice. We tried to ignore it, burying ourselves in classes and part-time jobs. I threw myself into my journalism assignments, even writing a piece on urban legends in small towns, carefully avoiding any mention of St. Agnes. But research led me down rabbit holes, forums where others shared similar stories. A hiker in 2015 who claimed to have seen lights in the windows and heard moans. A group of teens in 2002 who entered and emerged with unexplained injuries, one of them institutionalized after raving about shadows. The patterns were there, if you looked. No one who went in came out unchanged. One night, about a month later, Jake called me in a panic. "It's here, man. In my room." His voice was hoarse, breathless. I rushed over, finding him huddled in the corner, staring at the wall where a shadow stretched unnaturally long, defying the light from his desk lamp. "It followed me," he whispered. We stayed up all night, flashlights in hand, but nothing more happened. Sarah joined us the next day, admitting she'd found a scalpel under her pillow, one identical to the souvenir Jake had taken, though he'd sworn he left it behind in the hospital. We decided to research Dr. Voss more deeply. Digging through online archives and local library microfiche, we uncovered more horrors. Voss hadn't just experimented. He dabbled in the occult, blending science with forbidden rituals, believing he could trap souls in the physical realm. His journals, seized during the raid, but partially leaked, spoke of anchoring entities through pain and fear. The patients weren't just test subjects, they were vessels. And examination room 3, ground zero, where the barriers thinned. Armed with this knowledge, we debated returning, to burn the place or perform some amateur exorcism, but fear won out. Instead, we sought help from a local historian, an old woman named Mrs. Hargrove, who'd lived in Willow Creek her whole life. Over tea in her cluttered living room, surrounded by yellowed newspapers, she nodded gravely as we recounted our tale. "St. Agnes isn't just haunted," she said, her voice quivering. "It's a prison. Voss opened doors he couldn't close. Those shadows, the remnants of his victims bound there. And now, you've stirred them." She gave us a pendant each, simple silver crosses etched with symbols, and advised us to stay away, to forget. But forgetting proved impossible. The incidents escalated. I started seeing the figure in mirrors, a fleeting glimpse in the corner of my eye. Sarah's grades slipped as the whispers invaded her study sessions, murmuring doubts and secrets. Jake became paranoid, installing cameras in his room, only for the footage to show shadows moving when no one was there. Finally, in December, we couldn't ignore it anymore. The hum returned, louder, during a snowstorm that blanketed the town. It called to us, pulling like a magnet. We met at the edge of the woods, bundled in coats, the pendants around our necks. "We have to end this," Jake said, his face gaunt. Sarah nodded, clutching a canister of gasoline. I carried matches, my hands steady despite the terror. The hospital looked even more foreboding under snow, a white shroud over its decay. We entered the same way, the window now familiar. The air was frigid, but the metallic scent remained. We made our way to the third floor, the tapping greeting us like an old enemy. In room 3, the chair waited, the bloodstains seeming fresher. The hum swelled as we poured gasoline, the shadows gathering. As I struck the match, the figure appeared, scalpel raised. "You belong here," it rasped. But we stood firm, the pendants glowing faintly. Flames erupted, consuming the room. We fled as fire alarms, impossibly, blared, the building groaning like a dying beast. Outside, watching it burn from afar, sirens wailing in the distance. The hum faded. The scratches on my neck itched one last time, then calmed. We never spoke of it again, but the bond it forged, and the scars it left, remained. St. Agnes was gone, but in quiet moments, I wonder if the shadows escaped the flames, wandering free, seeking new vessels in the night.